אדוני היושב ראש, רות לפידות, חברים, קשה מאוד לבוא לארצות אחרי ששמעתם למעשה את כל הפרטים, וזה מזכיר לי קצת את הסיפור על קלארק קליפורד, and I'll tell it in English for the benefit of those that don't understand Hebrew. Clark Clifford, who was the legal advisor to 5 or 6 presidents in the United States, was seated at a dinner near a lady that introduced herself as Mrs. Manners. So he asked her, "Are you the famous Mrs. Manners that wrote all these books on etiquette?" She said, "Yes. So I want you to know, Mrs. Manners, that you have just finished eating my salad." Now, why do I tell you this story? Because if there were any people in this audience that were not against lawyers in general, after listening since 10 o'clock on this morning until now, so much legalism, I would not accuse you of anti-Semitism if you'll be against some the legal aspects of the conflict. I will try to be extremely short without repeating things that were said previously. Many books were written on 242, so I will refer, and the difference between the English text and the French text, everybody knows it. The first thing I want to mention is that traditionally, in the legal history and the diplomatic history of the State of Israel, whenever we negotiated with any Arab state, we previously had a long negotiation, and Zalman remembers it, with the United States of America, and we used to sign with them memorandum of MOUs, a memorandum of understanding. Once we had a big discussion because we wanted this agreement with the United States to be called agreement. The United States said this would imply ratification by the Senate, so we cannot call it agreement. They wanted memorandum of understanding. Finally, we reached agreement. It's not memorandum of understanding. It's not agreement. It's memorandum of agreement. But we explained to them that since in Hebrew you read from right to left, we won, of course. I don't know of any case in any diplomatic negotiation where an Israeli was involved where the other party won something. We always were the best and succeeded. What I want to mention to you is that in this memorandum of understanding, one of the issues that is repeatedly mentioned, and I say it was true until the Oslo Agreement, that we always had agreements with the United States of America. Whether it was the first withdrawal from the Sinai, the second withdrawal of the Sinai, the United States guaranteeing us oil for 15 years, but there is one clause which, to my knowledge at least, it's quite unique in international law. And the Memorandum of Understanding that was signed between Israel and the United States one day before the Geneva Conference that convened on December 21st, 1973, after the Yom Kippur War, there is a clause which says, and I'll quote to you, "The United States will oppose and if necessary vote against any initiative in the Security Council to alter adversely the terms of reference of the Geneva Peace Conference or to change resolutions 242 and 338 in ways which are incompatible with their original purpose." Now, this was a secret document. It was presented to the leadership of the Congress at a later date, and you can find it in the Congressional Record of the United States, a question that was put to the legal advisor. You know, whenever you have a problem and you are in politics, to make him guilty of all the mistakes made. Of course, the success is always the success of the statesman.
And he was asked, how is it that the United States of America could undertake an obligation towards a foreign sovereign making a commitment to vote against any resolution that will change a resolution in any way which is adverse, which will be considered adverse to the intent of the authors. And the answer of the legal advisor, also in written form, is that it is enforceable, which means that from the international responsibility point of view, the United States is committed to this clause unless we release the United States from this obligation. And we had afterwards a long negotiation because on the question of the oil, there was no definite date. According to the text, Israel could come in the year 2055 and tell the United States, I need oil for 15 years, and any U.S. administration would have been under the legal obligation to provide Israel with oil for 15 years. So there we accepted to give up. To my knowledge, to this day, this clause that you have in this memorandum of agreement from 1973, which was repeated in 75, was never cancelled. So when you have legal text, the issue is not what is written in the legal text, is to what extent you are ready to use your legal ammunition in order to defend your rights. And if Israel, at a certain date, on the basis of a legitimate decision of an Israeli legally elected government, decides to give up part of the arsenal, part of the ammunition it has, it is absolutely free to do so. The fact of the matter is that the first agreement that Israel signed with an Arab party, according to my knowledge, where we did not have any commitment from the United States when we started the negotiation, and we did not, I don't think that the United States was privy to the secret negotiations that were going on, was the Oslo Agreement. Now, the second point that I want to mention is that one of the facts, and then when you use an argument enough times, even if it's a lie, it becomes the truth. Unfortunately, many of our leaders, when they say if we don't accept this negotiation, we'll have to go according to 242, which means withdrawal, total withdrawal. And they managed, in this respect, it is an Arab success because they did manage to convince the world that 242 is withdrawal to the territories, to the area that Israel had under its control on the 4th of June. No matter, if you mention, and one of the first articles that were written about this resolution was Ruth Lapidot's article in a French legal publication, where she mentions all the facts. In fact, the issue, the item of the situation in the Middle East was brought up by the Egyptian delegation. There was a proposal by Mali. There was Mali and India, where they suggested that there should be a withdrawal of Israel to the 4th of June lines. There was a Soviet attempt at that time, and if you recall, the representative of the Soviet Union today was a Mr. Fedorenko, who, whenever he addressed Arthur Goldberg, he used to call him Arthur Goldstein to show that whether you are Goldberg or Goldstein, you are Jewish anyway, even if you represent the United States. So the proposal, the Soviet proposal was never put to a vote. That was the British proposal that was adopted. You heard from Professor Bloom the details about it this morning, so I won't repeat it. And what the Arab propaganda did succeed is, number one, withdrawal from all the territories, and number two, this resolution is self-enforcing, because you have in the system of the United Nations, and I will not go here into the details, you have resolutions adopted under Chapter 6, which is the solution, the settlement of conflicts, and you have Chapter 7, which is the chapter dealing with sanctions if you violate a decision of the Security Council. There is no doubt that the Resolution 242 was adopted under Chapter 6 because it refers to secure and recognized boundaries, which means that the borders that were before were neither secure nor recognized boundaries. Number two, there is absolutely no reference to Jerusalem, as it was mentioned, and today the Arab attempt is not only, first of all, to deny the Holocaust, so therefore there was no justification to establish a Jewish state, and secondly, Beit HaMikdash was never in Jerusalem, and so what's interesting is that in the Resolution 242 you have absolutely no reference to Jerusalem, no reference to Palestinians, and it was only afterwards, and when the
Arab states tried to have a reference to Arab refugees. This was also rejected, but on this, Ruth Lapidot, I think, will speak. There is a reference to refugees, and Arthur Goldberg, may he rest in peace, wrote a letter, I remember, to the New York Times explaining that since there were not only Arab refugees, but there were also Jewish refugees, about 800,000 of them, that were expelled from Arab countries, leaving all their belongings in the banks and their properties in the Arab countries. They are also entitled to compensation, no doubt about it. So I didn't touch the main points that were already discussed, but this resolution is certainly not self-enforcing. It has to be negotiated. These boundaries have to be established. There is no reference to a Palestinian state. That doesn't mean that Israel had no right to admit or to sign the Oslo agreements and the implementation of the Oslo agreements and the other agreements with the Arab countries. Now, the last point I would like to mention is that besides these, there is one issue that will certainly give food for thought to many jurists, and that is, what is the implication of the commitment of the President of the United States in a letter sent to the Prime Minister of Israel? This is the issue with the Ford letter on the Golan. I remember the person that drafted this this letter. This was on September 1st, 1975, here in Jerusalem. We were negotiating with the Americans the partial withdrawal from the Sinai, and Rabin, alav shalom, asked to get a commitment from the United States that they accept our presence on the Golan Heights and that they will support our position when it will come to a negotiation with the Syrians. The person who drafted this letter was one of his assistants, was Tzadok, may he rest in peace, and Ford wrote to Prime Minister Rabin, not that the United States will support Israel's position, but when there will be a negotiation on the Golan Heights, the United States will take into consideration the strategic importance of this area, which is some similar language to one that you have in the letter given by Bush in April of 2004, where on one hand there is reference to the presence of Jewish agglomerations in the Yehuda Shomron, but there is also a reference to the fact that everything has to be agreed by the parties directly concerned. Now, I think that it's high time for us to come back to all the commitments that we have from, not only from the United States, from other countries that made speeches and that made commitments, and to remind the world exactly what the attitude, not only of the Arab countries. There was reference today that no matter what we will do will be always condemned by the Arab states. But I'll remind you of another fact which we should keep in mind. In 1979, Israel signed a peace treaty with Egypt and gave back the Sinai and went back to the international border. What was the reaction of the European Union? They adopted the Venice Resolution in 1980, condemning the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt. And it's a written document. I was then ambassador to France, and I went to see the foreign minister of France, and I hope I don't reveal here state secret, Mr. François Poncet. And I said, forget that you are the foreign minister and that I am the ambassador of Israel. I would like to know how will a French teacher in 50 years from now explain to French pupils how France, democratic state, opposed a peace treaty between two belligerents, and who gave you the legal or moral right to tell Israel and Egypt, you don't have enough dead people, your cemeteries are not yet full to capacity, you should go on fighting. And his answer was this one. and I remember it verbatim. Number one, you don't care very much about what we say anyhow. Number two, it pleases our Arab friends. It did please the Libyans, and it did please the Syrians and all those that were against the peace process. So we should keep this in mind, and of course, this makes us look sometimes paranoid, but Kissinger already said that even paranoics have enemies. So my good friends, I wish you... no, their basic ground for condemnation was that we did not solve the Palestinian problem. And although in the Camp David, I mean, if there was the first Arab country to achieve something for the Palestinians was certainly Egypt. Although there's another point. Whenever we have complaints from Egypt concerning the implementation of of the treaty, and there were sometimes problems with the Egyptians, but their reference was especially to Palestinian problem. We have a specific provision in the treaty that there is no linkage between our peace treaty and the Egyptian and the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt and the Palestinian problem. But so when European states in 1980, and there was great hope, and I remember Vance to this day telling us at Camp David I, the one that succeeded, I'll finish in a minute, said that we are going now to negotiate with the King of Jordan, who is expecting us in London. So if the this was in 1979, if the European countries were against the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt, how could we expect any other Arab state to join the negotiation at that time? Thank you very much.